If you're shopping while working, eating, or even listening to this podcast, then you know and love the thrill of a deal. But are you getting the deal and cash back? Rakuten shoppers do. They get the brands they love, savings, and cash back. And you can get it too. Start getting cash back at your favorite stores like Levi's, Plow and Hearth, Adidas, Sephora, and Neiman Marcus. Stack sales on top of cash back and feel what it's like to know you're maximizing the savings. And it's easy to use. And you get your cash back sent to you through PayPal or check. The idea is simple. Stores pay Rakuten for sending them shoppers, and Rakuten shares the money with you as cash back. Download the free Rakuten app or go to Rakuten.com to start saving today. It's the most rewarding way to shop. That's Rakuten. Rakuten.com.
Bugs crashing your pack's party? Whether they've got paws or sneakers, your pack deserves a home that's protected from pests. That's where Wondercide comes in. Plant-powered protection made with steam-distilled natural essential oils that actually work. It kills and repels fleas, ticks, mosquitoes, and ants without questionable ingredients or overpowering smells. Safe to use around kids and pets when used as directed. Lab-proven to work fast. And proudly made in the USA. We offer sprays for pets, people, homes, and yards. Plus, spot-on treatments, collars, and even shampoos. Whatever your pack needs, we've got it covered. Founded by a pet parent looking for a better way to protect her dog Luna, Wondercide's now protected over 21 million lives and counting. You might have even seen us on Shark Tank. Go to Wondercide.com and use code WONDER20 for 20% off your first order. That's WONDER20 at Wondercide.com. Wondercide. Protect your pack with plant-powered Wondercide today.
This is a paid advertisement from BetterHelp. Let's pause and take a moment to talk about something very important. Life has its pressures for everyone, and we often carry the immense weight of expectation to never show weakness, to hide our true feelings, and believe that asking for support somehow makes us less of a person. But bottling things up isn't the answer. It can often lead to feeling down, burnout, or other unhealthy habits. We want to normalize the idea that it's okay to struggle. Real strength actually comes from opening up about what you are carrying and doing something about it so that you can be at your best for yourself and everyone in your life. If you're feeling the weight of the world, or even if things just feel a bit off, I can't stress enough the value of talking to someone. It could be a friend, a loved one, or a therapist. We here at This Week Explained believe that therapy can be incredibly valuable. Whether you've been in therapy personally or not, the broader benefits are clear. It's so helpful for learning positive coping skills, understanding how to set healthy boundaries, and it really empowers you to be the best version of yourself. And it's so important to remember that therapy isn't just for those who've experienced combat or major trauma. It's a tool for anyone looking to improve their mental well-being and navigate life's challenges. That's why we're thrilled to talk about BetterHelp. With over 5,000 therapists in the UK, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. And it clearly resonates with users, boasting an App Store rating of 4.9 out of 5 stars based on over 1.7 million client reviews. It's also incredibly convenient. You can connect with a therapist at the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy schedule. And you can even switch therapists at any time if you feel it's not the right fit. And here's something special for our listeners. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp is offering our listeners 10% off their first month. What are you waiting for? Talk it out with BetterHelp. Once again, our listeners get 10% off their first month by going to betterhelp.com/thisweek. That's BetterHelp.com/thisweek. Tired of feeling overwhelmed by the headlines? Want to truly understand the why behind the global chaos? Then you are in the right place. Welcome to This Week Explained, your weekly deep dive into the most complex and impactful stories shaping our world. I'm Tiana, and joining me as always is Kervin. Before we jump into the crucial developments of the week, a quick favor. If you want to ensure you never miss an episode, make sure you're following or subscribed on your podcast platform. It literally takes 2 seconds and keeps you instantly updated. And if you are getting value from what we are doing here, a simple rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify helps us reach more curious minds like yours. And don't forget the new interactive comments on Spotify. It's a fantastic way to engage directly with the show and other listeners, extending the conversation beyond the broadcast. You can also find more fantastic podcasts like ours by visiting leonmedianetwork.com, part of the awesome Leon Media Network. This week, we're diving into the latest from Ukraine and Gaza, escalation between Russia and NATO, and a deep dive into what is happening in Nepal. Let's start, as always, with the war in Ukraine. It has been a very active period with significant developments on multiple fronts that seem to be pulling the conflict in different directions. We've seen major military escalations, installed diplomacy, and a fascinating look inside the machinery that fuels it all. I want to start with the most direct escalation. Last weekend, Russia launched what has been described as its heaviest aerial bombardment on Ukraine since the war began. For the first time, a major government building in central Kyiv was hit. So what does this attack symbolize and signal at this stage in the conflict?
Well, I think it serves several purposes here for Russia. First, it's a clear message of their capability. They have the capability to hit these buildings in Kyiv. It also demonstrates that despite a long and costly war, Russia retains the ability to project significant force anywhere in Ukraine. But also, it's an act of political signaling at this point. It's aimed as much at Washington, D.C. and other European capitals as it is the capital of Ukraine in Kyiv. I think it's a forceful rejection of external pressure. It's a statement that Moscow will not be deterred by sanctions or by threats, and it aims to undermine morale. That's morale from both a military perspective, but also civilian and political perspectives as well.
And that attack prompted a swift and long verbal response from the United States. President Trump threatened tougher sanctions. And he spoke of moving to a, quote, second phase, end quote, of punishment against Moscow, whatever that means.
Yeah, that's what he said. Hyperbole as always, Trump-perbole, if you will. Just part of his pattern there. Now, the threat of sanctions is a primary tool in the playbook of the U.S. government. The U.S. Treasury Secretary elaborated a little bit on this. He suggested that with stronger European backing on secondary sanctions, specifically targeting countries that buy Russian oil, the U.S. believes Russia's economy could face a total collapse. Now, this frames the conflict as an economic endurance race. So everyone's wondering, can the Ukrainian military hold out long enough to collapse the Russian economy?
I mean, it's a compelling idea, but the threat of sanctions has been on the table for years, and it seems to be happening at the exact same time the diplomatic track is completely breaking down. Just this past Friday, the Kremlin itself stated that peace talks are, quote, more on pause, end quote, than active. So how do you interpret that specific language coming directly from them?
Yeah, look, it's a very deliberate diplomatic maneuver. For months, we've talked about it here. Ukraine has been saying that Russia is not negotiating in good faith and is only using the talks to buy time. Now, Russia's response to that had been that it was Ukraine who was unwilling to negotiate in good faith. They were trying to control the narrative of who is at fault in these, what I call non-negotiation negotiations. Now, for the Kremlin to now come out and essentially shift that narrative, saying things are on their end on pause, as you stated, it's another way for them to control the narrative. So it formalizes the stalemate without accepting blame in the situation. So they can simultaneously claim to be committed to peaceful dialogue while also pointing to President Trump's own admission that a deal is going to take some time here. So it shifts this perceived pressure off of them once again.
So they are acknowledging the reality that everyone already knew.
Yeah, finally. But they're acknowledging that while also putting the ball back in Washington, D.C.'s court. So we heard from the administration officials and senators that President Trump's patience is running out. But look, Moscow is observing that threats of these quote unquote very hard sanctions have not yet materialized into debilitating action. Russia's going to keep doing this. They're going to test the West resolve. They're going to test these red lines, all while being received, by world leaders, as Putin has been.
While that diplomatic front seems frozen, Ukraine appears to be escalating on another front entirely, which is economic warfare. They conducted a massive drone attack of their own, hitting Russia's largest oil terminal on the Baltic Sea. So what is the strategic value of a move like this?
It's a perfect example of asymmetric strategy here by Ukraine. So Ukraine can't match Russia's military scale. So they have to attack strategic choke points. And so hitting a major oil port like Primorsk accomplishes, I think, a few things here. First, obviously, it directly attacks Russia's revenue stream with their oil, the money that funds this war. But it also aims to create domestic problems for Russia. Right now, we're seeing reports of fuel shortages, rising prices internally. And finally here, I think this is a significant psychological blow. It demonstrates a sophisticated capability to strike deep into Russian territory at a highly sensitive and, quite honestly, well-defended economic asset.
The report also mentioned that this specific port is central to Russia's shadow fleet of tankers used to get around international sanctions.
Yeah, and I think that's crucial to Ukraine's plans with this attack. So it's not just about stopping the flow of oil. It's about disrupting this clandestine network Russia has built to sustain its economy. All of this in the face of these terrible, terrible sanctions that have been put on Russia. So by targeting the infrastructure that supports this shadow economy, Ukraine is trying to make the circumvention of these sanctions more difficult, but also more costly for Moscow.
This brings us to a really critical piece of the puzzle and something that connects both the military and the economic fronts, the weapons themselves. This week, Ukrainian officials were able to analyze a Russian cruise missile that hit Kyiv but did not explode. And they found that it was filled with dozens of foreign-made electronic components, many from American companies. So how is this possible years into a conflict with such heavy sanctions?
This is the hidden front of the war. These are all part of a global supply chain. Now, the issue lies with what are called dual-use components. We've talked about this with Chinese components. It's the chips and processors found in these missiles. They're not designed as military hardware. They're designed for commercial products, household electronics, our smartphones, all of those things. They are small, ubiquitous, and produced in the billions.
So they're not shipping them something that is obviously a missile part, like they're probably electronics and then stripping them down to get the pieces they need.
Yeah, absolutely. Western companies have, for the most part, officially stopped all sales to Russia. But what happens is that Russia uses a global network of intermediaries. So companies in third-party countries can purchase these components legally for supposed civilian use, and then they reroute them to the Russian military-industrial complex. It's incredibly difficult to police the end use of all of these, every single microchip that is sold globally.
So when we pull back and look at the entire picture from this week, we have a war being fought on at least 4 fronts. The conventional military front with major aerial attacks, a frozen diplomatic front where talks are on pause, an economic front where Ukraine is now striking critical Russian infrastructure, and this hidden supply chain front where a global cat and mouse game is being played out over tiny electronic parts.
Yeah, very accurate. What's been happening over the last few months. The conflict is not just advancing on one linear path. It is a dynamic system where pressure on one front causes a reaction on another front. So Russia escalates militarily. The West threatens economically. Ukraine honestly cannot win a conventional war of attrition. We've talked about that before. I think we had a whole episode that we used the word attrition, or at least I did, about 1,000 times.
Yeah.
So
I do remember that.
Because Ukraine cannot do that, it attacks Russia's ability to fund the war. So, and underneath it all is this constant, quiet struggle over the technological components that make modern warfare possible. So understanding the complexity of all this is key to understanding where this conflict might be headed. And that's exactly why our analysis centers on the strategic calculus, the overarching why, rather than just talking about the purely tactical engagements that define the day-to-day battles.
And while so much of the world's strategic focus remains locked on Eastern Europe and the grinding war in Ukraine, another long-simmering, I am talking about an event that feels like a foundational crack in the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. For the first time, Israel conducted a direct, acknowledged strike inside a Gulf Arab state, targeting the Hamas leadership in the heart of Doha, Qatar. But this story is so much more than just the strike itself. It is about its apparent failure, the deep divisions it has exposed within Israel, and a diplomatic fallout that is sending shockwaves from Washington, D.C. to every capital in the Gulf. So, let's start at the beginning for our listeners, Cartman. Walk us through what happened this week, and crucially, what was the intended goal?
Yeah, what you're referring to here is the airstrike targeting a residential compound where senior members of Hamas political bureau were meeting in Qatar. Now, the explicit goal was assassination to eliminate the top leadership of the group, including their chief negotiator. That's Khalil al-Hayya. And he was believed to be present in that residential building. Now, this was framed as a strike against the masterminds of the attacks on Israel.
And the crucial follow-up to that is, was it successful? Because the reports that have come out since Tuesday paint a very different picture.
Yeah, they do. By all public accounts, the operation was a failure. The primary target has since appeared in Qatar, even performing funeral rites for his son, who actually was killed in the attack. Now, the Israeli security establishment widely assesses that none of the top-tier leadership were killed in the strike. There is speculation that some have been injured, but the primary objective was not met. Now, the focus inside Israel has shifted to an investigation of why it failed. Was it flawed intelligence, or perhaps the type of munitions that was used because they wanted to limit collateral damage because it was happening in a Gulf Arab state, not just in Gaza. As we know, they don't care what the munitions do in Gaza. But they used the specific type of munition to prevent that collateral damage. So was that insufficient to destroy the entire structure?
The lack of success is stunning given the risks involved, and what I find just as stunning are the reports emerging now about the deep divisions within Israel's own security services before the strike was even launched. This was not a unified decision, was it?
No, it was not at all. This is the very interesting part of all of this. It perhaps is the most critical internal dynamic. The reporting indicates that this operation was pushed through by a very small political circle, that small political circle around Prime Minister Netanyahu. It was actively opposed by the heads of the Israeli Defense Forces, the National Security Advisor, and I would say most notably, the head of the Mossad.
So the Mossad, Israel's own foreign intelligence agency, the one best suited for an operation abroad, was against this?
Yeah, the Mossad, an agency renowned for its sophisticated and often audacious foreign operations, determined that the proposed mission in Doha was strategically untenable. Now, their assessment was rooted in two core concerns. The first one, that a lethal operation would collapse the delicate hostage ceasefire negotiations, but also that it would permanently rupture the agency's vital working relationship with Qatar. They are the key mediator here in the negotiations. Consequently, the agency refused to execute a ground operation. That ground operation was one they had designed themselves, and it led to a pivotal and highly unorthodox decision here by the Mossad. Now, the mission was reconfigured as an airstrike, and operational oversight was then transferred to the Shin Bet, that's Israel's domestic security service. Now, this internal dissent and the subsequent operational failure have profound implications for Prime Minister Netanyahu's political future. His entire political brand is predicated on being Mr. Security, a leader with unparalleled judgment in matters of national defense. So by overruling the professional assessments of his Mossad, the IDF, and national security chiefs, he took a high-stakes gamble and lost. Now, the failure not only exposes him to accusations of recklessness, but also politically isolates him. This makes him the sole architect of a mission that yielded immense diplomatic damage for no strategic gain. Now, Netanyahu may have severely undermined the very foundation of his political legitimacy.
That's an incredible internal dynamic. So let's pivot to another key relationship. The United States, Israel's closest ally, but also a close ally of Qatar, which hosts the largest American airbase in the region. You've been there several times.
Yes.
So where was the United States in all of this?
Look, I can say, honestly, that they were effectively, and appears deliberately, sidelined in this. I can tell you that command centers at multiple U.S. combatant commands were left in the dark. The Israeli jets reportedly flew south over the Red Sea to launch their missiles from the other side of the Arabian Peninsula. And this route was chosen specifically to try to avoid Saudi airspace. And then crucially, to minimize the warning time for the United States. Had these jets flown over Saudi airspace, the Saudis would have alerted the U.S., who would have alerted Qatari forces and diplomats and government officials. The White House was not notified until the missiles were minutes from impact. And from what I have heard, in those minutes, they did reach out to Qatari officials about this, but it was far too late to stop the attack.
I have to say, I'm not shocked that the United States until it was too late. I mean, if they're ignoring the Mossad, their own people, why would they give a crap what the United States has to say about this mission?
But it's very interesting because, like, the Mossad should have told someone within the CIA, and that could have trickled up, but that did not happen. So there's a lot more I need to dig into about this to figure out what really happened here.
So how does the White House respond when it is so publicly bypassed by its closest ally on an action against another one of its allies?
Yeah, look, it's, I would say, with great difficulty. So we're seeing them perform this very delicate tightrope walk right now. President Trump has publicly stated he's very unhappy with the strike. He said it does not advance American or Israeli goals. Now, at the same time, he has called the elimination of Hamas a worthy goal. This diplomatic contradiction that you're hearing from President Trump was on full display at the United Nations because the U.S. actually allowed a Security Council statement condemning the attack to pass unanimously. This is a very rare move. The U.S. typically blocks any statement critical of Israel. I think Israel made a complete miscalculation with this one. My assessment is that even if the targets had been eliminated, the resulting diplomatic and political fallout would have ensured the mission was a net failure.
It sounds like a signal that is being read loud and clear in the Gulf. For decades, these wealthy Arab states have operated under a core assumption. If you are useful to the United States, it will protect you. That assumption seems to have been shattered.
Yeah, look. I think what you just said is the fundamental takeaway for the entire region. The perception in the Gulf is not that the United States could not stop the strike. It's that they chose not to stop the strike. So they point to past instances where D.C. did intervene to call off Israeli actions, most notably against Iran, and they see that as proof that the capability there exists. So the conclusion they are drawing is that the U.S. either gave Israel a green light or it simply does not care about the sovereignty of its Gulf allies. As I said, if the Mossad knew this was going on, someone had to have mentioned that to the U.S. intelligence agency, the CIA. So, like I said, I've got to dig deeper into this. Maybe the Gulf states are right. The U.S. chose not to. We'll do that in a later episode. But that feeling of betrayal is very profound. The Qatari emir himself called this strike a state terror. He said, quote, "We are betrayed," end quote.
And we are already seeing a reaction. This is not just anger. It seems to be translating into
Yeah, it is. The attack is acting as a powerful unifying force. That's why I call it a net negative or a net failure. The president of the UAE, a nation that had its own rifts with Qatar, was the first leader to arrive in Doha less than 24 hours after the strike. Right now, we are seeing a flurry of high-level diplomacy across the Gulf region, across the Middle East. This is culminating in an emergency Arab-Islamic summit, which is happening in Doha this weekend. Now, the goal, as they have stated, is to move from solidarity to action. The UAE has already summoned the Israeli ambassador in protest, and that puts the U.S.-brokered Abraham Accords under severe strain.
So that brings us to the biggest question. What happens next? If the old quid pro quo with the U.S. is broken, what are the real options for...
They're weighing a spectrum of responses. Reporting is even coming out that a similar attack within the borders of Egypt had been planned by Israel. Egyptian intelligence identified these plans. At that point, they threatened action against Israel had they pursued it. We saw that Israel did not pursue that. But right now, for the Gulf states, there are options for direct retaliation. That's going to be very limited, but diplomatically and economically, they have significant leverage right now. I think we could see a formal downgrading of relations with Israel by the UAE. We may see Gulf states begin to financially and politically support legal cases against Israel in the international courts. That's something that they've largely avoided before now. Now, economically, they could use their massive sovereign wealth funds to boycott companies with stakes in the Israeli economy. They could also begin to quietly turn down American requests and reevaluate the trillions of dollars they have pledged to invest in the U.S. economy. The thinking right now is if American partnership does not provide security, then perhaps that money is better spent elsewhere.
And with all of this chaos and realignment, you have to imagine that Iran is watching very closely.
Yeah, I think they are the primary beneficiary of this crisis. So Iran sees a deep public rift between the U.S. and its key regional ally happening right now. It sees a divided Israeli leadership, a unified Arab bloc forming in opposition to an Israeli action. So for Iran, this turmoil creates a permissive environment. This reduces the credibility of American deterrence. It creates a window of opportunity to advance Iranian agendas, whether that's with its nuclear program or through those regional proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, all while the U.S. is preoccupied with this diplomatic firestorm. Now, the long-term consequences are still unknown, but what is clear is that the fundamental rules that have governed the region's security for decades have been thrown into question. The fallout from this Doha Gamble, this is going to be felt for a very long time.
Clearly, the fundamental rules, leaving a power vacuum in a permissive environment. This instability, however, isn't confined to the Middle East. A different kind of threat is escalating tensions on NATO's eastern flank. We'll discuss the alarming reports of drones being shot down over Poland after a quick ad break, so please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, listeners. Before the break, we were discussing the profound geopolitics following the recent crisis. Now, we turn our attention to Europe and a story that brings fair directly to NATO's doorstep. Polish authorities have confirmed that air defense systems were activated to shoot down several unidentified drones that violated their airspace. So, Carvin, can you start by walking us through the initial incident?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we saw was an incursion of a significant number of suspected Russian drones into Polish airspace. Now, there have been occasional stray missiles or drones that have crossed borders before, even into Polish borders, but this was different. This was different in both scale and response. Now, the key development here is that Poland, with air support from its NATO allies, engaged and shot some of those drones down. This marks the first time a NATO member is known to have fired shots in a situation directly related to the Russo-Ukrainian war.
That is a major threshold to cross. I imagine the response from the alliance was immediate and went beyond just that initial aerial engagement.
Yeah, it was. Almost immediately, NATO announced a new mission. They named it Eastern Sentry, and it's not just a statement. This is a tangible reinforcement of the eastern flank of Europe. We're seeing countries like the Netherlands, the Czech Republic, also France, of all people, of all countries to commit troops to the Eastern Front. They're committing those troops, the helicopters, air defense systems, advanced fighter jets. What they're trying to do is bolster Poland's security. Now, the Polish defense minister made a point of calling these, quote, concrete declarations, end quote, not the, quote, empty gestures, end quote, he said his country has seen in the past.
And where does the good old U.S. of A. stand on this? The president's response seemed quite measured in comparison to some European leaders.
Yeah, it did. For once, President Trump was measured. He publicly suggested it could have been a mistake. That's a much more cautious tone than we are used to from him. Now, officially, NATO's top military commander has said the intent is still under investigation. So what we're seeing here are three distinct narratives playing out. We have Poland saying it's a deliberate provocation, Russia saying, or Belarus saying in support of Russia, this was just a technical accident. And then we have a much more reserved wait-and-see approach from Washington, D.C.
But honestly, this seems to be a coincidence. Could you connect this drone incursion to the other geopolitical pressures that we're building in the region? Like what was happening that might have served as a catalyst for this? Or maybe they were taking advantage of the fact that everyone was distracted failure in Qatar.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you make a great point, honestly. And I think the context is absolutely critical to understanding the severity of this. You mentioned it, Israel's strike within Qatar is one part of this. There's also this incursion happened during one of the most intense and large-scale Russian aerial assaults on Ukraine. Hundreds of drones were launched. Maybe they thought if they could squeeze a couple through, they could test NATO's resolve. Another thing, and perhaps more importantly, this also coincided almost exactly with the start of the Zapad 2025 joint military exercise between Russia and Belarus. Now, these exercises always cause anxiety on NATO's eastern flank, and Poland has even closed its land border in response sometimes.
Is there anything else?
Yeah, so there has been recent, very public discussion among European nations, led by France, of all countries, about potentially sending troops to Ukraine as part of a post-war security guarantee. Now, Russian leadership has responded very strongly to this. They warn that any foreign troops are going to be considered legitimate targets within this war. So when you combined this intensified air war, the Zapad exercises, the rhetoric around foreign intervention, you get an incredibly tense and volatile environment where an incident like this is naturally interpreted much more seriously.
With the military flexing its muscles, what is happening on the diplomatic front? I know Poland took this straight to the United Nations.
Yeah, they did. And Poland requested an emergency session of the UN Security Council, and that took place immediately. As you would expect, it became a forum for these competing narratives to be presented on the world stage because Russia's there as well. Poland and its European allies condemned Russia's actions as a dangerous escalation. They said it undermines any prospect for peace. Russia, in turn, rejected all allegations. They accused NATO and the West of aggravating the crisis and obstructing a peaceful resolution.
So the diplomatic channels are reflecting the same deep divisions that we are seeing on the ground.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Now, the UN serves as a venue to formalize these positions, but it's unlikely to produce a resolution. The core of the issue remains the same. Whether by accident or by design, the conflict in Ukraine created a direct military confrontation between Russia and a NATO member. This is a line that has now been crossed.
It truly feels like the situation is more precarious than ever, a significant military escalation on all fronts.
Yeah, look, we have warned of this from the very start. This very podcast explained that this is quite possible for this conflict. It's quite possible for this conflict to spill over into NATO borders. Now, the key thing I think to watch for is going to be the official findings of NATO's investigation. They'll present what the intent was for these drones. Also, the continued military posturing on both sides of that border. Poland did invoke Article 4, so could Article 5 be next?
And that question, for now, will have to remain unanswered as we will leave Eastern Europe here and turn our attention to South Asia, specifically Nepal. Over the past week, we have witnessed a political earthquake. A government that seemed stable just 1 month ago has completely collapsed in a matter of days. It is a stunning series of events, and it happened with a speed that I think caught many observers, and certainly the government there, completely by surprise. So, let's start at the beginning for our listeners. What was the specific spark that lit this fire? It seems to have come out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think the immediate trigger was a government decision that, in hindsight, was a profound miscalculation. The government of Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Ali announced a ban on 26 social media platforms. Some of these are the ones we all use: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, WhatsApp. The stated reason was to control misinformation and hate speech by forcing these companies to register locally.
A move we have seen other governments attempt, but the reaction in Nepal was not just criticism, it was explosive.
Yeah, you're absolutely right here. For the population, especially the younger generation, this was not a simple regulatory issue. It was seen as a direct assault on their freedom of expression and their primary space for connection and political discourse. This frustration that had been simmering online, it did not just stay online. It spilled out onto the streets, and it did so almost immediately.
Which brings up the crucial point. This could not have just been about a social media ban. Those kinds of protests flare up and often die down, like with X here in America. Whenever they tried to... not X. Sorry, TikTok. Dang, I'm not on... like anything. Also, I can't remember.
No, you're absolutely right. With TikTok, when Musk bought Twitter, we saw the same kind of things happen.
Yeah, so this one toppled the entire government, though. So what were the deeper currents at play here?
Yeah, once again, absolutely correct on this one. You're actually digging deeper, Tiana. Because the ban was this social media ban was merely the spark that ignited a much larger powder keg of public grievance. For years, there's been a deep and growing frustration in Nepal with systemic issues. We touched on this very topic about a year ago with the fact that within Nepal, there is endemic political corruption. There's rampant nepotism, a stagnant economy that offers very little hope, particularly for the youth. The youth unemployment rate, that is over 20% right now.
I saw reports about a hashtag, which was hashtag Nepo Kids. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think that this is the central to understanding the anger. Social media was the very place where young Nepalis could see the stark contrast between their own struggles and the lives of the political elite. So the hashtag Nepo Kids trend involved users sharing posts from the children of politicians, showcase their luxurious lifestyles, these designer clothes, expensive holidays, the luxury cars that they had access to. This was not just envy. It was seen as flaunting the proceeds of corruption while millions of their peers were struggling, or millions of their peers were forced to seek work abroad outside of Nepal. The social media ban, was an attempt to shut down the very platform that was exposing this reality.
So you have this deep well of public anger, and the government essentially puts a lid on the primary release valve. So what happened next? How did it go from street protests to them burning all these buildings down and the prime minister resigning and like the family? I saw videos of the families. It's not funny, but...
Right, being lifted by helicopter.
Just dangling from the bottom of the helicopter, and I would have been tights, but
it was the only way out for them.
It was wild seeing them all strapped to this cable, like the roof. Yikes!
Like Saigon, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And it's the same feeling there. Like if they would have stepped out of their residences or their government buildings, they might. It is at a probable they would have either been killed, tragically and unfortunately, or harmed, very much so. So that was the only way out, and it really escalated tragically. Now, during the initial protests in Kathmandu, police cracked down on the protest. 19 protesters were killed. That was the point of no return. The anger over the ban was transformed into outrage over the government's violence against its own citizens. So the protests widened, they became more intense, and then, just as you said, demonstrators set fire to the Parliament building and other government offices. If you are on our Instagram page, you will notice we have one of those pictures of the Parliament building on fire, and it went across all of social media. Now, faced with a complete loss of control and public legitimacy, Prime Minister Ali and his entire cabinet had no choice. They had to step down.
And your statement, Reuters confirmed that actually people were killed in the protests. So, yeah,
thank you.
It was only updated. I just want to say it was 72 people who were, because I heard 52 yesterday, so the number has gone up to. So, obviously, this was a complete collapse of state authority. And throughout this, technology played a central role, not just in fueling the anger, but in organizing.
Yeah, look, technology played a decisive role here. When the government initiated the ban, users immediately pivoted. There was a reported 6,000% surge in signups for VPN services, and that was because they wanted to circumvent the blocks on the various social media platforms. People downloaded offline messaging apps. Also, when the government fell, the movement did not dissipate. The movement migrated to platforms like Discord, where massive servers with over 100,000 members are now hosting debates and planning the next steps, including who should lead an interim government.
Which is fascinating. A decentralized, leaderless movement is now attempting to shape the country's political future from a chat server. So where does that leave Nepal now?
I think it leaves the country in a very delicate and uncertain position. The Nepal army is on the streets. That's primarily to maintain order, to prevent a total breakdown here. They're not taking power in a coup, so it's not the military that's taking power here. They're just holding the space. Meanwhile, these networks of young activists are coordinating to form a civilian interim government. Now, I think they've just finally put someone in place. This is the former Chief Justice, Sushila Karki. She's seen as an anti-corruption figure. So with the youth movement putting in a new form of government, they've even announced a tentative date for new elections. That's going to be March 5th of next year.
All right, let's zoom out, Carvin, as you typically like to do. So why should someone listening in another part of the world pay close attention to what just happened?
Yeah, this is not an isolated event. That's why. This is a potent case for study, and perhaps a blueprint for a global trend at this moment in history. We are witnessing a pattern of digitally fueled, youth-led movements that can challenge and even dismantle established power structures with incredible speed. We saw similar dynamics to this in Sri Lanka. We also saw it in Bangladesh.
So this is about more than just Nepal.
It is. It's about a generational shift in how political power is contested. The trajectory is one where younger citizens, feeling disenfranchised by legacy systems they view as corrupt and unresponsive, are using the tools at their disposal to take direct action. These events do not happen in a vacuum. When you place this kind of potent domestic instability into the current global landscape, which is already tense, this adds another layer of volatility. It highlights a broader global concern about the nature of power and of influence in the 21st century. I am very confident this is not a blip. This is a signal.
I mean, it's a fascinating dynamic to watch. The idea that a government's stability may now be inversely proportional to its youth unemployment and perceived corruption, especially when that corruption can be broadcast in near real time from a smartphone in the hands of almost every single individual. So as always, thank you, Kervin, for your analysis. Is there anything else you want to discuss?
No, that's all I have. Do you have anything you want to talk about?
Well, I just want to say next week we will have an episode on, but the following week, probably not, to be honest.
I'm actually working with Cole to try to get a podcast out as an interview podcast for that weekend.
Well, that's something you could mention, dude.
Could have mentioned it to you before we started this. Yeah, it was something I was thinking about today. In getting one done before that day, or we might not have one. So
yeah, but I mean,
I haven't figured it out yet.
Just be ready. You might not get your regular news updates from us. 20.
Hold up. Let me look at the calendar.
So it'd be the 29th.
That's good podcasting.
The 29th, not the 29th. It would be
the 29th.
The episode of the 29th might not, be there, but we'll try our darndest. And since Kervin is talking to Cole, it might happen. So that's cool. Good deal. I got ahead of myself.
We'll see if we can schedule it. Yeah, we'll see about that. And then maybe on the 6th as well. We'll see. Or we might have really nice audio on the 6th, not to get ahead of ourselves.
Really nice audio on the 6th.
Because we'll be in the same room. In our studio. So big things coming over the next 2 weeks.
Well, I mean, at the very least, fun stuff. So anyway, is that it? Is that all we got for now?
Yeah, it's been a tough week. Lots of events going on that happened this past week. So.
Well, thank you so much for listening to This Week Explained. We hope that you found it both informative and engaging. If you have any feedback or suggestions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. For more in-depth coverage of these stories and more, be sure to follow us on social media at This Week Explained.
Tiana, thank you so much.